10th of March. It's probably just a minute or two past 2 o'clock. I'm Councillor Porwood, Chairman of the committee, and Councillor Cathy Rice-Oxley is Vice Chairman. Welcome all members, and particularly welcome to Councillor Richard Dixon-Warren, who's a newly elected member. I hope you'll enjoy this committee. I'm pleased to welcome you. If we start off with apologies for absence, please, if we've got any.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Jackie Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, we follow the agenda. Disclosure of interests. If anybody's got any interests to disclose, please announce them, or when we come to the item, you can announce them in the course of the meeting. Any interest to disclose? No. Okay. Thank you. Item 3. Minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of January. I've got a comment to make on the minutes, but first of all, we'll go through them and I'll come to my comment a bit later on. So if we look at the minutes, item agenda 3, we go through page by page. Anybody got any queries or comments? Page 3, page 4, page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you. The work programme last meeting, although I wasn't here, I note that in the work programme for the last meeting, the item external audit plan was in the work plan for this meeting, the 16th of March, but now it's been relegated to not scheduled at all. So I just wondered why the external audit plan isn't ready for this committee.
Alison's looking at me as if she can answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The planning audit won't commence until the 28th of March. At this point, external audit will then be in a position to be able to produce the audit plan for the external audit that will hopefully commence during August of this year. So it will be presented to this committee at a later date prior to August. So we're hoping to be able to bring it to either the April or June meeting, but we'll just need confirmation from external audit on that.
If everybody's, I've got just one comment to make on the minutes. It's not a query, it's just clarification really. On page 8, at the bottom of page 8, we talk about the counter fraud framework and the recent fuel theft that's generated. The chairman of the finance committee, Graham Gill, has contacted me. He's had a representative and a member of the public query this and what action we're taking. It was discussed at the last meeting, and the minutes actually do say the continued access to fuel is now limited, supervised by CCTV cameras have been installed where the fuel tank is spot checked. So we are taking action. I believe Tracy could probably give us a little bit more of an update on that. Can you have clarification for it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the actions arising as a result of the investigation, so these were actions raised by the investigating officer. I'll just run through them. So the first one was around the maximum limits on fuel and the frequency of refueling. So that's been implemented. All of these actions have been implemented, I hasten to add. The fuel management and monitoring has been tightened up on. So for each vehicle, there's an expected miles per gallon range has been set, and any that fall outside of the parameters are flagged by the system. There are random spot checks to verify the vehicle mileage are input. There's spot checks on the vehicles, that's physical spot checks on the vehicles. Anti-siphoning devices have been fitted to all vehicles. And there are CCTV cameras now in place which cover the fuel tanks. There's been targeted staff communications at the time of the investigation, and all of the actions have been followed up twice to check on implementation. In respect of the police action, that's still ongoing, and at some point in the future, we hope to bring back a further update to Governance and Audit Committee.
Thank you very much, Tracy. That's fine. No, if there's no further queries on the minutes, can I have a proposal to accept those minutes? Vice Chairman, propose it. Can I have a seconder, please? Well, all right. Councillor Sue Woolley will second that. Thank you. We now go on to the next item. Updates from the previous meeting, listed on page 13. Three updates.
Sorry, Chair. Are you not going to vote on the minutes?
Okay. Can we please have a show of hands for approving the minutes, please? Yeah, there's only three of us. Can you were absent, weren't you? Yeah. Next item, we go updates from the previous meeting on page 13. There's 3 items on that. Are there any comments on those items?
Thank you, Chair. On page 13, minute number 55, we're going in this meeting to share some sample screenshots. Are we? I beg your pardon, Chair. I've got them on my table in front of me. Are these in the pack, in the public pack, or are these for our eyes only? Given that we've said in the minutes that we were going to share them at this meeting, then I'm not sure if that means we were going to share them amongst ourselves or share them with everybody.
These are examples where you're referring on page 13 of the agenda. Examples are to be shared at the March committee. Those are what we're referring to.
Yeah, I believe so. I hadn't seen them on the desk before me. Are they in the public domain?
As I see it, yes. They've been issued as in the public domain to me. So I see no reason why not, unless I'm advised otherwise. Does the Deputy Monitor?
Thank you, Chairman. So these haven't been published as part of the agenda pack or a supplement pack for this meeting. I think they're there for the committee's information. I'm not sure from the relevant assistant director or director that's responsible for providing them whether or not they are to be in the public domain at this stage. So I will double check with whoever it is that's provided them for the committee, and if they are able to be published, we'll make sure they're published.
Yeah, I agree. As far as I was concerned, they've been issued as part of the agenda pack, part of the public domain, but I think Graham Watts will clarify that later. Thank you. Any further questions? No?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, could I just provide an update on the point 56, please?
Yeah, please.
So annual refresher training on Governance and Audit Committee along with local government finance has been booked for Monday the 9th of May. These will be face-to-face sessions with Ian Fifield, the external trainer. Invites will be sent out shortly to the committee members, and all councillors will be informed via email update by the end of this week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alison. I don't think there's any need to vote. It's an update from previous meetings. I think there's no need to vote on that. We can just, there's no call for a vote on that. So I think we can move on to internal audit, item 5, progress report. I think Lisa was going to come, but she's been held up in traffic. So I presume you're going to do it. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can confirm Lisa's on her way, so she will be here shortly, but I'll take this first item anyway. So presented here is the internal audit progress report. We provide this at each committee just to show our progress against the plan and also feedback any findings from any audits that have been confirmed and finalised since the last meeting. So in terms of progress with the plan, all reviews have now been completed and finalised for the year. Hence, in a following agenda item, we will be presenting you with a draft annual report, but we'll come on to that on that agenda item. So since the last meeting, we've finalised the last two reports, which are Continuous Assurance 4 and Follow-up 4. Again, I'll cover follow-up afterwards because that's a separate agenda item. There's been one change in the plan since the last meeting. Due to timings, with Continuous Assurance 4, that has now superseded the Continuous Assurance 3, so we can provide you with the most up-to-date findings at this meeting. So I'll just take you through Continuous Assurance 4 now. So with this one, Continuous Assurance, we provide 4 times within the year, testing 10 key controls, which should be complied with where possible in all instances. So as part of this last round of continuous assurance, we raised 3 areas of non-compliance against the 10 controls, and I'll just briefly take you through each of these now. So the first area was a low management action, which was agreed with management relating to planning applications. So we sampled 10 applications, and just in one instance where an extension had been required, we couldn't see any evidence of this being requested and approved on file. The next management action agreed was in relation to housing repairs, which again was a low action. This is just in relation to formally documenting a repairs policy that we can assess then against when we're doing our testing. And then the final action, again, was a low management action agreed in relation to IT access. When testing 10 levers from the council, it was identified one where IT had not been notified at the time to disable the Active Directory for that individual. And then furthermore, within that sample of levers, there was one who hadn't been notified again so that their finance system access could be removed. That was then removed as part of the audit. And I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Woolley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm just a little bit concerned when we look at housing repairs as an example, a representative sample of 10 jobs. Well, I've got 10 jobs in my area alone, and I'm just wondering whether it actually is representative. Who says it's representative? What's the, we know our housing stock, and 10 seems a very, very small figure.
Are you able to answer that? I mean, I suppose really the question is 10 an adequate number to be representative of, is it, or out of how many? If 10 is out of 10,000, it's not. If 10 is out of 50, it probably is.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies for being late. Who chooses the 10? Who chooses the 10? Do they just pick them at random, or are they given 10 to look at?
Any more questions, or shall we? Okay, if you can, I don't know. Yeah, if you can answer it, please.
No, thank you for the question. So 10 is agreed between us and management at the start of the year for each of these controls. So we test 4 times a year, and this testing is purely to test whether the controls are in place and whether they're working. But also in terms of who picks the sample, this is picked by internal audit independently. So we get provided with a full report from the system of all repairs completed within the period, and we then sample test from there. So we pick the sample ourselves.
So is internal audit absolutely confident that 10 is a representative number?
So 10 is the sample size agreed at the start of the year with management when we do these audits.
Sorry, Chairman, I didn't ask that.
No, I can see your point, Councillor. I'm still a little bit confused. Is 10 out of how many? It seems, do you actually know out of how many jobs? You're testing 10 out of, what is it, out of 1,000? Or we're trying to get a feel for, is 10 representative, aren't we?
So I don't have the figures with me right now on how many jobs, but we get a report for the whole 3-month period that we're testing against. and we pick a sample of 10 from that period. So if needed, I can provide that after.
Okay, I think we'd probably express a little bit of concern as to, is 10 really representative? I don't know what the rest of the committee think, but my feeling is I've got some doubts as to if 10 enough, and it's probably not beholden on you. If that's been agreed that you would test 10, I would suggest 10 is probably not enough, because it must be a lot more jobs than that. So, Councillor Woolley.
Chairman. Could we perhaps have it as an action that we look at this with management to decide, to assure ourselves around the representative number, especially, you know, as we go into a new financial year?
Yes, I agree with that, Councillor Woolley. I think we need to assure ourselves that we are taking a representative sample, and so I think we should look at that. I think that should be minuted. Thank you. We got your hand up, Councillor Baxter, or not? Yes, you are. You can call me chair, chairman, or whatever you like.
Thank you. That's very progressive and very welcome. Thank you. Are we on to IT access controls yet, or have we not done that yet? Yeah, I've got that far, but have we looked at page 25 yet? Yeah, we have. Okay, cool. Does anyone happen to know how many housing jobs there are? If we're talking about 10 being a representative sample or not, does anyone in the room happen to know how many housing jobs we have? And my next question was about halfway down the IT access control paragraph. It says that in one case, there was no access in place to disable. Does that mean that the person who had left never had access to the computer in the first place, or does it mean that we weren't able to disable the access? That's my, sorry, I'm not understanding what I'm reading.
Thank you. Are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for the question. Yeah, so in that one instance, they never had access to Active Directory due to their role. And in terms of the housing application, I don't have the detail with me right now in terms of sample.
Before I move against the Councillor Batt, are you happy with that answer or not?
Yeah. If you don't know how many housing jobs we've got, we can't really decide here whether or not it's representative sample or not. I'd just like to say, Councillor, welcome to Councillor Cottier. He's got in just before the deadline. If he hadn't arrived before the end of March, he would have caused a by-election. So I guess it's worth the trip. Thank you.
That's a little bit irrelevant, isn't it, Councillor Baxter, to this committee?
Not as irrelevant as Councillor Cottier.
Point of order. And point of order, Chairman, it's disrespectful.
I think Councillor Batt, it is irrelevant to this committee, isn't it? Right. If we could move on, I noticed that Lisa's arrived. I don't know, would you like to add anything further, or are you okay? Okay. All right. Councillor Dilks wants to speak. Is the committee happy that Councillor Dilks speaks? I'm happy that he speaks, but yeah.
I am. It's relevant to this meeting.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
I object.
Okay. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a number of questions, if I may. I'm clearly not a member of the committee, but thank you for allowing me to speak, committee. On planning, on page 9, to deal with them in chronologically, we appear to have had a dip sample to find out how many applications are actually determined within the statutory period. And it says in paragraph 2 that we, the auditors, received the planning data which detailed all applications for the period. But it doesn't say how many applications were dealt with during that period. It doesn't give any sort of meaning really to the words that are in the report. So I'm just asking if you were aware of how many applications there were in the period and how many were not determined within the statutory period. Should I stop there? I've got some more questions, but if you want to deal with that one first.
Okay, I assume you're talking about on page 23 of
Page 23, Mr. Chairman, yeah. And then finally on that point on the planning, it's the target date is the 31st of May. It seems, quite a long period to sort of sort what is quite an easy thing, I would have thought, to solve.
Okay. Auditors like to answer?
Thank you. Again, we can provide the information on how many there was for that period, but again, our sample testing is of 10 as agreed with management at the start of the year for each round of continuous assurance. Again, testing against the key controls, whether they're in place. So that's that, but we can provide after if required.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. But the reason I raise that is because at Planning Committee we have a regular update on applications not determined within the statutory period, as you would expect. And in that period, or at least up to the 6th of January, I can tell you there were 74 that were not dealt with within the period. For many of them for very good reason, applicants not sending in the information when they're asked for it, etc. I'm happy to move on to the next point, if I may, which is housing repairs over the page. I hope I'm still relevant. I just wanted to ask on that, actually following up on Councillor Woolley's relevant question. We've got 10 dip samples appropriately assigned and completed within the target times, etc., and talks about the possible risk. I just wanted to ask the internal auditors, as you know, I'm sure this council's in effectively special measures regarding housing after year-on-year failures to carry out basic safety checks on our 6,000 properties. Can I just ask, was that highlighted? Was that brought out, that failure brought out by internal audit, or was it by another means? Not just that, but for example, the Riverside problems that we had, where we had 4 years of failures to provide adequate heating and hot water. What I'm saying is the whole purpose of internal audit is surely to highlight these problems at the time, but we seem to have gone a long time without realising that we had a problem. And then on that point of housing repairs, I noticed that the risk is listed as low. I would question whether it's a low risk. And again, I'd question the target date to get it sorted of the 31st of May. They all seem to be the 31st of May, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, internal audit.
With regard to the point on housing compliance, we did conduct an audit earlier this year on housing compliance, which has been brought to this committee in a previous meeting. And from that, we did give partial assurance, but we've provided that to this committee this year as part of the IA plan. And on the second point to do with housing repairs here, and the date provided, that's the date we agree with management at the time of the audit, as it's their action to complete. And this action here, in terms of the low, this is the action raised is purely on the basis of documenting a repairs policy, which management are committed to delivering.
The only thing I would say, thank you for that. The only thing I would say, Councillor Dill, as you know, we know I'm governance and audit when other issues were raised before with me as well. So it has been quite an ongoing thing for a long way. I also think it probably is low risk in the fact that on the housing issues, yes, there are problems, but good progress is being made at the moment. So I take that now it's low risk. It was probably high risk to start with, but I can see now why it is a low risk, because good progress is being made at solving the problems. The problems have been identified. The Director of Housing is taking the appropriate action and we're moving in the right direction. So I can see that it is low risk and agree with that. The target date, I believe, is agreed by auditors and the Director of Housing. So I don't see a problem with it, really. I mean, I can see where you're coming from, Councillor Dilks, but I think all in all, problems have been identified, problems are being dealt with. So I'm quite happy that it's actually low risk.
Thanks for that, Mr. Chairman. I've got one final one, if I may. I don't think we've moved on to page 29. I've got some questions on that, but on the IT access control, I welcome the fine. I don't welcome the findings, but I welcome that it's been, an issue has been raised there and is being sorted. Again, it's 31st of May to sort it out. Seems to be, and again the risk is low, but it's still it's still following up Councillor Baxter's question. It is a concern that people who've left the authority have still had access to financial information of the council after they left the employment of the council. And again, it's just listed as a low risk. I've got to say, I question that, complacency, if I can suggest that word. Thank you.
Do you want to answer that, or I mean, I'm comments to make, Lisa, or no? Alison, you have. Alison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to confirm that it's the financial management system, and you can only actually access that when you still have your IT equipment. So though access hadn't been removed, people hand their equipment back when they leave the organisation. And I can confirm that a new process has been put in place now. IT, there's a double process in place now. Payroll will also send through a list of leavers to IT to ensure that all access is removed when people leave.
Can I say thank you for that? That is reassuring to know that they can't access unless they have the equipment. It's clearly not clear in the report, and that's nobody's fault. I just read it with a bit of a horror, really. But thank you for clarifying that.
Right. Could I just? It doesn't actually say, but I think it'd be useful if we all approve that report, update. Internal audit progress report. So could I have a proposer for that, please? Right. Councillor Gloria Johnson, and a seconder. Councillor Wood, seconder. I would have done in Shanton. Right, can we all vote if we're in favour, please? Anybody against or abstain? No, that's carried. Thank you. Now, the Vice Chairman, Councillor Cathy Rice-Oxley, has got a point to make. She raised a point of order earlier.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'd just like to pursue this point of order and come to you. I believe that Councillor Baxter used the phrase "not as irrelevant as Councillor Cottier." I find this incredibly disrespectful to a fellow elected councillor. It's notably not the first time recently that Councillor Baxter has been disrespectful to another councillor. And I wonder if Councillor Baxter would like to take this opportunity to apologise to Councillor Cottier and indeed to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. You may find it disrespectful. I think the people of Grantham Barrowby Gate would find it extremely disrespectful that their councillor hasn't turned up for 5.5 months to any meeting at all. Not a single meeting has he been to for 5.5 months, and he's come here today. He's not part of the committee, and by coming here, he saved the authority some money by not having a by-election, and he also keeps his expenses for his allowances for another 5 months.
Councillor Baxter, is it within your remit to question the personal actions of another elected member?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Councillor Baxter, as chairman of this committee, what you've raised is irrelevant to the agenda. It's irrelevant to the Governance and Audit Committee, and I must admit, you don't know the personal circumstances behind it. So I would ask you, can you please apologise?
I'm not going to apologise.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to come in on this earlier. I think it's absolutely disgraceful, the attitude of Councillor Baxter. He doesn't, as the Chairman has said, doesn't know the personal circumstances. And frankly, I think it's absolutely appalling to do that in a public meeting when the councillor isn't a member of the committee. It's not relevant to the agenda. Stick to the agenda, please, Councillor Baxter. And I would urge you to apologise, because I think it's an absolute disgrace.
Chair, I thought we were moving on.
We are moving on. I'm disappointed, Councillor Baxter, you won't apologise, because I do think it's irrelevant. Can I ask you to think again?
As I said, Chair, I thought we were moving on.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Internal audit follow-up report, item 6, page 27. Is Lisa going to do that or not? You're going. All right, I keep trying to get Lisa in, but maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll give Lisa her chance shortly. Presented here is the follow-up 4 report. This was our final follow-up conducted during the year. This covered 15 management actions across the secure remote working and ops resilience audit and the street scene stock control audits that were conducted in the prior year. From our review, we issued a reasonable progress opinion, and this is a positive opinion. Of the 15, 8 were implemented or superseded in full, which left 7 remaining as ongoing, and therefore from this none were deemed as no progress at all. So for these 7, progress was evidenced towards completion, and new actions and dates had been agreed at the time with management, and that's reflected in the report. Upon finalising the report as well, we had an update from management on 3 of the actions for street scene, where we had a verbal update that these have now been implemented. Thank you. I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you. We'll open it up to questions. I know the Vice Chairman's got a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just some questions about the IT stuff on pages 34 and 35. Just in light of the situation with Russia, really, I know we're all being advised to change our passwords and everything like that. So I'm wondering, firstly, if Management Action 5, reviewing the current IT policies, whether that would still, in the light of recent events, be seen as low. Secondly, and just above that, it says the cyber incident policy with support from a third party. Would an appropriate body be the National Cyber Security Centre, or would there be another recommended body for that? Thirdly, sorry, I'll repeat these if you need them. On page 35, it says about all staff are required to complete training around cyber security, and I'm wondering if that includes elected members as well as staff. And lastly, about the phishing, the annual phishing exercise, which was suggested, but it says an executive decision had been made within the council not to implement this action. And I'm just wondering who that went through, because again, recent events being what they are, we probably need to throw everything at this that we can, and should that decision perhaps be revisited? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I can take part of the question. I think a lot of those might be more for management. So this report was as at in December when we conducted this. And therefore the assessment of the actions were at that point in time. I think in relation to the other questions, they're more questions for management as opposed to internal audit about their response and what they will and won't do now in light of the new changes.
Any further questions, Councillor Woolley?
On the back of that, I suppose for me, it raises the question of how flexible and the ability to move quickly is concerned, particularly around the cybersecurity issue, in as much as, but I'm speaking more broadly about all our processes. We are in a very different place now to where we were in December. And I think particularly of the government guidance around the awful situation in Ukraine, and government guidance suggesting that cybersecurity for local government we should all be very careful with it. So I just want to be assured that management and internal audit are able to move quickly as and when necessary, because we still see that this is low and the completion date is the 31st of March. I completely respect and accept that in December those dates were pertinent, but they're not now.
Any further comments you'd like to make on that?
Sorry, I'm sure that Alison wants to chip in terms of the actions that management are already taking. I think in terms of internal audit taking it forward, obviously that will be your new internal auditors as they come in. I'm sure what they will be doing is they'll be taking the actions that are still outstanding from the internal audit work that RSM has conducted to make sure that those actions aren't lost and that they are still followed up to make sure that management do continue to take action to close those down. And I'm sure that will be part of their internal audit programme going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can confirm that the council has successfully secured some funding to improve cyber resilience across the council. Microsoft on a weekly basis provide security updates to us. So if they recognise a weakness in the systems, we're primarily Microsoft based, they will then release security on a weekly basis or as frequently as they need to, which we then implement to ensure that our systems remain secure. Thank you.
Dilks, we've got a question of the council.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it was it's just a matter of concern actually in reading the report. Personally, I went through it last night, and it's clearly about providing the council with the assurances they require, which it states, and it says there's reasonable progress, which is good. But on page 29, 5 out of the 20 actions had no evidence provided and therefore are excluded from the graph. So because a quarter of the actions, you know, is, I don't know what sort of is happening to them, but I just sort of question that and ask for an explanation of it, really. Perhaps I've missed something. But it does say at the bottom of page 29, and quite clearly, until the action is fully implemented, the council is still exposed to risk. And then when you go over to page 30, from that graph, you can read that only 1 in 3 of the actions that have been recommended by the auditors have actually been completed. Now, 1 in 5 of them are no longer appropriate, I accept that, but still 1 in 3, you know, a third, only a third, 2/3 are not actually completed. And I just question, is that really reasonable progress, as is stated?
Back to the internal, is it reasonable progress?
So our progress is worked out on Appendix A in the report itself, which gives us a matrix of how to assess the progress, which is in line with RSM standards. So in this instance, the amount of actions that were ongoing and completed met the reasonable standard in line with our Appendix A.
I see what you're referring to. On Appendix A on page, well, it's page 36 on my agenda pack, it gives the explanations of what's good, reasonable, little or poor, doesn't it? That's what you're referring to. So, okay.
Yeah, as you say, but you know, as you say, that's in there, and it gives the percentages. The overall number of actions fully implemented. You know, if you over 75%, you get a good. Reasonable is over half to 3/4. Well, it seems to me, perhaps I'm misreading it, forgive me, but only a third of the actions in this case have actually been completed. Well, that would bring you down to, if you're generous, little progress.
Okay. Comment, Lisa.
We have reduced some of the original priorities from medium down to a low based on the action that had already been taken by management. So that does there skew the interpretation of that table a little bit. So it's you need to link the how many medium priority actions have been fully implemented and how many have now been reduced down to low. And that then gives you the overall reasonable conclusion.
Are you confident then that reasonable is the right result, really, then, Lisa?
For this particular follow-up review, yes, we are confident that
Okay,
reasonable is the
thank you.
right conclusion.
Do you want to come in, Alison? Yeah, Alison.
And I think it's, thank you, Mr. Chairman, just for members to note that some of the actions hadn't actually reached their completion date at the time of the audit. So therefore, we wouldn't necessarily have expected them to have been fully completed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Yeah, Councillor Woolley.
Having my money's worth today, aren't I, Chairman? I suppose I just want to work back through, and I will appreciate in advance if this is not our area, but you mentioned right at the start of this meeting, or very near to the start, you made a reference to fuel theft. And I'm assuming that that is likely to have fallen within street scene stock control. And because it's never come up, or the specifics haven't ever come up through this route other than through stock control, how can I be assured with some of these management points still not fully implemented that we still haven't got a weakness there? Does that make sense?
I think the level of priority that's assigned to it details the level of risk. So all of these are low risk. So some of it will be due to a policy not necessarily being, it might be in place, but it might not have been documented. So therefore that's classed as a low risk because there is a control, but the auditors haven't got the documentation to be able to fully audit the control. So as all the risks are low risk, that should have provide some level of assurance that there is nothing serious within any of this, because internal audit will have reviewed all of the process, won't you, as part of your internal audit? Thank you.
Are you happy with that answer?
I sort of think I hear what you're saying. I'm not convinced that that gives me the assurance that for the organisation as a whole that you know, we still haven't got a weakness because we don't have the documentation, and I don't want to get into the operational arena. That's not for us, I accept, but it's having something a little more concrete than what we have here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we can probably move on now. Can we have I think we should accept that report. Could I have a proposal to accept it, please? Well, I will propose we accept it. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Johnson, I think. Okay, all in favour? And none against, that's unanimous, isn't it? Okay. Now we move on to item agenda 7, the draft annual audit report. I think Alison's going to introduce this, aren't you, Alison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the committee is asked to receive, consider and accept the draft internal audit annual report in the annual opinion. Paragraph 1.3 provides a summary of the audits undertaken by assurance levels between 2021 and 21-22. So you see from this table that significant improvement has been made to improving the internal control framework. As for 21-22, there were no minimal assurance reports, a reduction in the number of partial assurance reports, and an increase in the number of substantial assurance reports, which is obviously a positive direction for the council. I can confirm that all audit actions that are identified are actively monitored by use of some hosted software called 4Action. The system allows the responsible officers to manage implementation plans alongside agreed timescales and enables the council to ensure that all actions are monitored. The responsible officer receives regular emails from the 4Action system highlighting the number of actions that are outstanding, the date that it needs to be completed by, which does enable easy monitoring of actions. I'll now hand over to RSM to present the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I will take the report as read, but just to pull out some of the key elements that we've included within the report. Our overall opinion is included on page 48 of the overall pack, where you can see that we have identified that there are weaknesses within the framework of governance, risk and internal control, such that the overall framework could become inadequate and ineffective. Now, in terms of the scope and limitations of our work, just to highlight that some of our internal audit work.
Have you got your microphone on, Lisa? I'm not sure you have actually.
Yeah. Apologies. So just to highlight that some of our internal audit work was undertaken during 21-22, so was affected by the disruptions of the pandemic. So therefore our overall conclusion and report should be taken with that context in mind. We've just highlighted on page 49 some of the factors and findings which have informed our overall opinion. So just to highlight that our opinion is not just informed by the work that we undertake during the year, but also our interactions with management and also our attendance at these committee meetings throughout the year. In terms of internal control, just to highlight and support what Alison said in her introductory comments, during the year, we raised a total of 73 management actions within across the assurance, advisory, etc. Now, in terms of comparison with prior years, that compares to 112 actions that we actually raised and agreed with management during 2021, of which 14 were high, 9 were medium, 21 low and 8 not classified. So that does demonstrate some improvement in the overall control framework based on the areas that we reviewed during the year. Just in terms of the implementation of internal audit management actions, we have had the 4th follow-up report presented at this meeting. In terms of the previous reports, we did agree that management had made reasonable progress in 3 of the reviews, but little progress in 1 of the follow-up reviews. So that is why that we are still inferring that there is still a little bit of work to be done, which your incoming internal auditors need to make sure that they pick up as well, and I'm sure that they will. Just another couple of elements that I need to highlight to you in terms of our performance on page 52. Just to confirm that we have not undertaken any work or activity during 21-22 that would lead us to declare any conflicts of interest. And also that in terms of conformance with internal auditing standards, our latest external quality assurance review was undertaken and completed in December 2021. And that concluded that RSM generally conforms to the requirements of IAA standards and other professional standards and codes of ethics. Just to highlight to members that generally conforms is the highest rating that you can get in terms of those EQA assessments. Happy to take any specific questions that members might have on that report. This report will remain in draft format until the end of the financial year, at which point we will be issuing it in final format, subject to any further amendments that might be needed before then.
Before I put it out and ask questions, I've just got a question myself, actually, Lisa. I was a bit surprised at the overall opinion you give, actually, because the overall opinion is there are weaknesses in the framework and governance, etc., etc. But I notice on page 44, background to the report, there seems to be substantial improvement from the previous year. So I couldn't really, I know you've explained a little bit, but I couldn't quite see why you'd put the overall opinion in that category and not 1I. I mean, obviously, if that's your opinion, that's your opinion, but it seemed to me substantial improvements have been made. It's not perfect by any means, but could you just explain why you've left it in that sort of, there are weaknesses and it doesn't go up because you've got 4 categories of opinion, haven't you? That's quite damning, really, what you've actually put it in.
We do, and we do have regular discussions internally at this time of year when we're providing the annual conclusions. Just to give some context in terms of our internal procedures when we're issuing annual opinions to our clients, they do go through a second partner review process to make sure that they agree with the assertions that we are providing within our annual reports. This one was a difficult one. It was a borderline as to whether it should actually go into the next bracket. On reflection, because we still did issue 2 partial assurance conclusions, and we did still have some internal audit actions that have not yet been implemented, we felt that the overall framework still does need some work to make sure that it remains effective, basically, which is why we've gone with the conclusion that we have done.
Okay, and if I could follow that up, you did say you'd be doing a revision, a final report later on, didn't you? And then you'll be assessing it then on the latest information.
So what we will do is if there are any significant changes in terms of the overall framework between now and the end of the financial year, then yes, we will review it and revisit it. And if necessary, we will reissue the annual report.
Yeah, it's just like on from the Director of Housing. I speak to the Director of Housing, what progress, and he gives me assurance that we are making significant progress on the improvement on that. But I noticed in your report, it's brought significant gaps still remain in the design and adherence to controls. That's not the message I'm getting from the Director. I don't know whether things have improved, but you'll look at that later on, obviously, to do a final report.
We will reconsider. We will
Yeah.
go back and have another
Okay.
look at how management are doing in terms of implementing those agreed management actions. I think some of the challenge that we have is when are the implementation dates for those actions that we probably won't have already considered those within the follow-up work that we've already done. So what we'll do is we'll take that away. We will have another look to see how many of those management actions that we deemed were still outstanding overall when we did the final progress report and the final follow-up report.
Yeah,
to
because
see if
obviously
the
our
improvement
job
has
is to
been
look
made.
at assurance from various sources. Obviously, you
Yeah.
as internal audit is an important source, but there are other sources as well. Any questions from Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Am I to take it that we will see RSM again at a future meeting?
Technically, I believe this is our last meeting. However, if management do want us to attend a future meeting to present the report again, we're more than happy to do that.
Thank you for that. I was building up to a tearful farewell, and in case I don't get the chance if either of us are not here, I want to thank RSM for the work they've done on our internal audit over the last, I don't know how many years. Certainly, I've got to the point now where I think I understand what you're telling me and really comfortable with that. So I hope that I can get in with the new lot in the same way and understand what they're telling me. I really appreciate, certainly the traffic light system has been really helpful, and I mean, you're an auditor, so obviously you're going to tell us the truth, but I really appreciate the work you've done. So my second point, Chair, is earlier on I was being given lessons in respect by members of this committee. I've got to say that I think it's quite disrespectful that the person who is presumably presenting this report, the person whose name is on it, was out of the room for most of the time that it was being presented and was chatting to someone for the rest of the time. I don't need to mention names, but I think it's a bit, well, I'm surprised that he wasn't in the room at the time the report was being given. My third thing I wanted to say was on page 48, yes, you made the same point that I did, Chair. The overall opinion is that there are weaknesses in the framework of governance, risk management and control, such that it could become inadequate and ineffective. I don't know why you express surprise, though, because having sat through these meetings for the last year or so, virtually every meeting we've had a traffic light saying that we're in trouble or that things have gone wrong. These are highlighted on page 50, as you know. On page 50, under local authority searches, it talks about how we've been taking 22 working days for searches when the government target is only 10, so way behind on that. No one on this committee can have escaped the trouble that we've had with housing. We've been taken into special measures for housing, and I understand that we're either out or nearly out of special measures for housing, and it's had an impact on all of our tenants. It's endangered all of our tenants that we didn't do proper checks, fire electrical safety checks for probably a decade, and very much thanks to the internal auditors and the new chief executive for bringing this to the fore and actually addressing the issues. I mean, that's not the only issue with housing. We've also been waiting for a voids policy for 4 years at least from when it was first mentioned on this committee, and now thankfully it's finally appeared. And on income and banking, the high risk areas related to the absence of controls around cash reconciliation and so on. So I'm not massively surprised that we've got a poor report, and certainly room for improvement. And I hope that this committee will be at the forefront of making sure that we do actually get better. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say, Councillor Baxter, I don't quite agree with you, and that'll be no surprise to you. I mean, yes, there has been problems, but my point was we have made significant progress from last year. If you look at the table on page 44, yes, there was problems. There are always problems to solve, aren't they? And we have made significant progress. That was my point, that why we're still in that same category when we've made significant progress. Yes, there are still things to sort out, but my feedback I get, my assurance I get, particularly say from accounting staff, from the Director of Housing, is that we are making progress quite good. So that's why I say I was surprised we're still in that program. And I'm pleased that Lisa and RSM are going to look at that and maybe come up with a revised report. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. I'm not trying to, but you obviously want to come back at me.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to come back, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that we have made significant progress, and as you know, we've had lots of briefings and meetings and so on about the state of housing. We've got another one tonight, which is again behind closed doors for a housing update. Doesn't say on the agenda what it's about, but it's a members' briefing rather than a public meeting. And yeah, I agree with you. We've made progress. It's obviously only since you've been in the chair that we've had these more positive reports. Thanks.
I wonder if Richard Wiles would like to come in on income and banking that was given partial assurance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologies, I can't be with you, but I don't think you'd want me in the room with you anyway. Just in terms, I mean, I appreciate what Lisa said, because it was actually news I'd heard for the first time that it was a more challenging assessment, because I had fed back some frustration that I didn't feel the report reflected the work the committee and the council has been doing to ensure the control framework continues to be improved. And it is obviously disappointing when we get the same assurance level as the previous year, when clearly you can see that the positive change in direction on the level of assurance is given overall. I mean, bearing in mind this is an authority-wide position that the auditors are giving us, so it isn't specific to one service area or another. It is a authority-wide position, so it is taking in lots of information, and those examples given in the report, I recall the committee having significant debate about them. For the land charges one, for example, it was more about performance. It wasn't really about internal control weaknesses. It was about poor performance and turnaround times on land charges, which were down to resource issues in that team. The cash collection one, if you recall, it was about some very isolated examples of checks being taken across the road to the local bank, and the vulnerability of one individual whilst doing that. But it was a very isolated incident in the context of a pandemic and everybody working from home. So we have, during the year, the committee has challenged and pushed back on internal audit on some of these, and internal audit obviously very able to give their opinion, but we don't necessarily all have to collectively agree with it. So I do think in the round, the direction of travel has been positive, and it is pleasing to hear that Lisa and the team might reflect on the overall opinion, because it is a significant assessment they give. It has implications for us. It goes into our annual governance statement. It features heavily with the external audit when they're doing their annual review work and their close down of accounts. So it does have significance for us, and we do all want to be in a position where we can all share and reflect on it as a fair position for the authority. And I do feel there is some further work to do when you look at the context of the audit plan for the year and the positive progress that's being made generally. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Well, Councillor Woolley first.
Thank you, Chairman. I slightly take issue with Richard in that whilst I accept that certainly through the COVID period, things will have been difficult. But those high-risk areas under finance, one of them relates to the absence of controls around reconciling cash collections. That is not, that is a mechanism that could have been put in place immediately. I struggle to understand why this particular area of work has lacked or been behind. Likewise, again, I to a certain extent accept the housing compliance side of things and the difficulties, but quite honestly, when we've got high risks that are relating to electrical testing, and we're looking at all of our housing, if we've got an issue with our housing and our electrics aren't safe, we've got an issue. I would sooner have, I actually thank Internal Audit for this report, because if that's how they see it, and they have been our consistent auditors, then that is acceptable to me. And I think I'm going to pick you up on a point now, along the lines of, although there might have been improvement, and again, accept that, but it's those timescales when you look at page 45, that, you know, the time that it's taken to move from minimum assurance to partial, it's just too long. You know, I go back to that. So the electric side of things, on a very basic point, you know, how much longer waiting? So you know, I'm not going to fall out with you about it, but I don't think
I wouldn't dream of falling out with you,
completely agree with
Councillor.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks wants the question.
Yeah, I mean, I just if I can, you know, respect Councillor Woolley for, you know, doing the job that she's there for. You know, that is absolutely right, what Councillor Woolley's just said. I've got to say, these are the professional people. They've come in and they've looked, and the overall feeling is a weak report. You know, there is weaknesses that need to be sorted. Some of them I accept are probably being looked at right now, and I accept that. But, you know, let's not run away from this. I also kind of just say, I welcome the fact that Councillor Adam Stokes is no longer in the position of presenting his annual report on internal audit to an audit committee chaired by his own father.
Chairman, point of order. I think that's another bang out of order comment.
Well, you may think so.
I think just the attitude over there of both Councillor Dilks and Councillor Baxter is an absolute outrage. And to be fair, you're only asking questions at the chairman's discretion today, Councillor Dilks.
Oh, right.
So I think you should be using your time more wisely.
Yeah, Councillor Dilks, yeah, I would say it's a bit, I'm not Councillor Stokes' father, as you know. And I think that's going off at a tangent, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
You want to continue?
You're very kind, Mr. Chairman.
Or shall I cut you off?
We can do what you like, but it was to pick up the point that you have quite rightly raised about the report in Councillor Stokes' report, that he actually wasn't here to present. I appreciate that, but it is his report that claims the significant improvements have been made. And Mike, you've already picked up on how does that match the findings of the negative overall finding of the report, which is one of weakness, is negative. It's in the bottom half of where we should be. And I think my question really is, how does that compare? Serious question. How does that compare with previous years? You know, have we been in this position before? Or is this new to us? I don't know, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Alison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, could I just come back on the issue around cash reconciliations? I'd just like to confirm to the committee that it was trivial amounts of cash that weren't being reconciled. It was the income that was being collected from the toilets. So there is now a reconciliation being undertaken when the cash is collected from those machines. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just make a few points. Obviously, we're a governance and audit committee, and we're to seek assurance from all different parts. And internal audit is a very valuable part to seek assurance from. So I don't dismiss that, but I think we have made significant progress. I've also had meetings with the Director of Housing about this. You were invited to it, but didn't attend. I've had that briefing. You've got a briefing tonight. I've been to that briefing. So it's not just internal audit I get the information from. We get assurance from various sources and we put it all together. I would like total satisfaction on everything we do. And I very much think if we don't get that, we should follow it up. And probably as a committee, it would be better if we got more people in, more directors in, and that's what I intend to do in the future, to question them. So I'm not just defending the administration. We need total assurance, and we need to aim to that. But we need to get our information from all various sources. That's what I would say. I've got a question probably for you, Lisa, as well. Obviously, yeah, I thank you for all the work that the Internal Audit have done. That's been very valuable to us. You've raised a lot of issues, and that's good. We're now at a period where it's handing over to another audit company. How are we going to do that? Have we got a detailed programme? Because there will be still things outstanding. How will we deal with that, handing it over to Lincolnshire Assurance?
So in terms of making sure that all of the outstanding actions that have already been agreed with management don't get missed, obviously Assurance Lincoln will have access to 4Action, which is the action tracking software, so that they will be able to make sure that anything that needs to be followed up continues to be followed up. We're more than happy to have discussions with Lucy and the rest of the team just to see if there is anything else that needs picking up before they actually start on their journey with the authority. We will do whatever we can to make sure that it is a smooth transition for you.
Okay, thank you. It's probably a question I'll ask for Lucy when we come to your report about how we're going to follow it up on your audit plan as well, but leave that time being. Right, I think if there's no more questions, we can go to what we think about the report. I would point out on page 49, where it talks about governance, that you've actually said there is sound governance framework in place, and we have observed that the Governance and Audit Committee is effective in monitoring and challenging management and holding them to account. So really that's a pat at the back for us as a committee. I think we can always do more. So I'm not complacent about we've done everything we can. No, I think we should always try and do more, and I'm sure that's the only right way. But I think you've given us a pat at the back with that. We've got a recommendation what we should do to accept this report, and I want to accept it, but I'd like to add something else to it, because I do feel quite strongly that we've had a positive direction of improvement on it. So where's the recommendation? I'd like to say the Governance and Audit Committee is asked to consider and accept the internal audit report for 2021-22. I'm quite happy with that. I would also like to add, though, that the Governance and Audit Committee is asked to note the position of direction of the improvement in assurance levels given by RSM between 2021 and 21-22. So I'm adding that as an additional sentence to the report. So we're not just accepting as per the recommendation with this, I'm adding that additional sentence to it. Do you want me to read it again? Right. So the Governance and Audit Committee is asked to note the positive direction of the improvement in assurance levels given by RSM between 2021 and 21-22. I'm trying to get over what I said previously, that I think there has been improvements made, and I want that recognised, rather than just we accept the report. So I'm proposing that. I don't think necessarily Councillor Woolley was seconded it, were you?
I wondered if
I hope you would.
Well, I just wondered if we could tweak the words and put the direction of travel rather than note the improvement, note that the direction of travel of improvement. Because
I've said positive. Governance and Audit Committee is asked to note the positive direction of the improvement in assurance levels given on the basis of that chart. Yeah, there has been an improvement, and I realise that RSM don't think that's enough to put us up into the next category, but there has been a positive move forward, an improvement. That's what I'm saying, rather than we just accept the report as it is.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Are you seconding it?
Oh, God.
Do you think
I'd go that far? My goodness. Yes, I'm happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Support you.
So got a praise of the seconder, Councillor Baxter.
I understand and appreciate that the report does show signs of improvement, but what your amendment is basically saying is we're not very good, or we're not as good as we should be, but crumbs, you should have seen this when we were awful. And I don't think it needs it. I think that by accepting the content of the in recommendation 1, consider and accept the internal audit report, we are accepting warts and all, the bits that have improved, the bits that need improvement. I don't see the reason, the need for any positive spin on it. In fact, I think as a governance and audit committee, we should avoid positive spin at all costs.
It's not positive spin. It's been proposed and seconded. All what I'm just saying is we accept the report, but we note the positive direction of improvement in the assurance levels given. So I don't think it's positive spin. Now I think I proposed it. I think Councillor Wood is second there. I think we should vote on it. All those in favour of what I'm proposing, please. Against? And no abstentions. Just Councillor Baxter's against. Okay, we'll move on.
Sorry, Chair, could you record my against? Thank you.
Right, I don't know whether you want to leave now, or you can stay if you like. But
if it's okay with you, we'll just absent ourselves from the meeting at this point in time and wish you all the best.
Thank you
for the
very much
future.
for your services to the audit committee. I'm sure we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We're going to the next item now. That's the internal audit plan going forward, 2022-23. Is Lucy going to present this, or?
Thank you, Chairman. It's going to be myself just to introduce ourselves, and then Alistair will be taking through the detail. So I just wanted to introduce myself as Lucy Pledge, your new head of internal audit. I work for Assurance Lincolnshire. I've been working in audit, internal audit for a number of years, and I headed up the service for over 10. So we're really pleased to be working with you in partnership to deliver your internal audit plan. And one of the things we've been asked is to hold a workshop to go in a bit more detail about us, how we work, and obviously some of the reporting, and picking up some of the questions that you've raised around the ease of reading reports, the traffic lights, just to assure you we do use those similar sort of concepts, and also to give you some more insight in why we choose what we do and how we do our judgments, just to give you a bit more understanding of the audit process. I think it's key from the discussions and observations today to note that the head of internal audit and their opinions are independent, and it's important that that independence is maintained, but also picking up your points that we are the third line of assurance, management and corporate oversight for that total picture. So again, we've been asked sort of to work with yourselves to how you get the best use of the assurance framework of the council and your internal audit service going forward. So the plan is an indicative plan. We actually start working with you from the 1st of April. We've brought it together through discussion with your senior leadership team and looking at your risk registers, but it will be subject to review halfway through the year once we've worked through and done some more work on your assurance framework. So I'm just going to hand over to Alistair to introduce himself and also go through the plan in a bit more detail. But obviously, I'm happy to ask any questions at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Lucy. So, as Lucy said, this is a plan which will cover 22-23. We'll seek to provide assurance within the agreed resources. So it's a flexible plan which may update to reflect any changing needs and any new risks and priorities. The focus is on significance, sensitivity and level of assurance, and this leads into the head of Lucy, head of internal audit's annual opinion on governance, risk and control. So the plan is 142 days long and will focus on the key areas. So in terms of financial governance, we'll be looking at key control testing. The governance and risk, we're looking at risk management, good governance and decision making, health and safety and programme management. For critical activities, we'll be looking at housing void management, housing income management and HRA business, building programme. And for ICT, we'll be looking at cybersecurity And then we will, of course, follow up on any limited or low assurance audits. So welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We go to questions first. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll put it down. Any questions? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, and welcome to the team. Certainly, the proposed plan is interesting, and two of the bits that are interesting are the good governance and decision-making paragraph. I don't know if you know, but we've had a external review of our scrutiny processes led by a Conservative councillor from another authority working for the Institute of something or other, and that report presented to the council last August is yet to reach the public domain. Do you expect that would be the kind of effectiveness of scrutiny? Is that something that you see as being auditable under this plan? My second point was to, welcome obviously we have to have ongoing inspection of our housing works, but we've got two big programmes going ahead in the next foreseeable. First of all, environment SK issues, so grounds maintenance and all that Environment SK do. Environment SK, I guess, would have their own auditors, but in terms of are we getting value for money and are we getting what we're paying for from our wholly owned company? Is that something that we as a committee want to go forward? I don't know. And I realise, Chair, you're in an invidious position because you're Chair sitting on both you're a chair, what are you? You're a director of Environment SK as well as being the chair of this committee. The third thing is we are hopefully going to do the biggest investment that this local authority has done for many years in the in the refurbishment of an existing leisure centre. We're planning to spend about £10.7 million on a scheme. When the public sector spend £10 million on anything, there is scope for mistakes and mishaps and other problems. Personally, I'd like some assurance that the procurement process for the procurement of a new refurbishment leisure centre is going to be watched every step of the way. Is that something that comes in within the realms of internal audit? If not, how do we make sure that we comply with procurement regulations and procurement law? Thank you.
Well, there was a few questions there, wasn't there? So I'll start at the beginning. So I think the key thing for me around the role of the committee is making sure that you're looking at governance, risk and control. So in terms of the commercial activities and environment SK, and if I've missed any of your questions, to repeat them. There's been we did when we were doing the assessment look at including commercial activities, but there's been a report by your outgoing internal auditors on that, so we haven't included that, but those are the kind of things that come into our risk assessment. So again, within the level of resources that we can in terms of give that assurance around the third line of assurance, we do have to sort of look at what we can add most value. So they'd already done the work on that, so we haven't actually included environment SK or commercial activities in this particular plan. But all the areas that you raised today, we can obviously revisit when we come and relook at the plan, look at the risk profile, because this is the key focus of our audit, is a risk-based plan. So, and we also look at where we can leverage assurance. So the other question you mentioned was around decision making. So that does cover scrutiny. So we will be looking at what that review said and if we can place any leverage assurance around that work that's been done in August. So we will be looking around the effectiveness of the scrutiny role. Similarly to your role as the head of internal audit, we're looking at governance, risk and control and the assurance arrangements. So we will be looking at how that
decision-making ensures that good governance is maintained. So we will be looking at that. So we'll be bringing that back through. And we've put it in 2 phases so that we have one to look at the structure of the governance arrangements and then how they work in practice. So again, picking up, again, a key issue is not just what the systems and processes are in place, but also how people behave, how people operate those in practice is absolutely vital in terms of any public due diligence. So again, you play a key role in that. I also play a key role in that, in holding up the mirror in terms of how things are run and making sure appropriate due diligence is operated. So we'll be looking around that, around the governance and particularly the decision making. We will scope the work on that with the monitoring officer. So what was the big project? So we were looking at those projects in general under programme management. So at the moment we haven't included procurement within that, again, because some of the work that's already been undertaken, but we will be looking at the large projects in terms of programme management. So that will pick up potentially some of the areas around the leisure centre. So Councillor Baxter, I hope I've given you some assurance that we will be looking at things, but because we're coming new to the authority, we need to do some more work on the level of risk, the level of assurance you already get through your assurance framework already. But hopefully this gives you a good start for 10 to monitor what's really important as in the first 6 months of the work programme. Does that help?
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I welcome the comments, and I welcome especially what you've said around governance and decision making. I think it would be useful to have some external eyes on that process as it crawls forward. I don't know what leverage assurance is, but I look forward to finding out. As for the leisure centre, so we're going to spend 10 million quid on one project. I really think that should be high on someone's agenda, that we don't mess it up. And I'm not saying that anyone would mess it up on purpose. I'm just saying that's a critical spend for this authority, and we really need all the help we can get to make sure that we do it properly. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add my comment to Councillor Baxter, yeah, of course it's £10 million is a large sum of money, and we have procurement regulations and rules of how we go about that, don't we? So yeah, but it needs to be done correctly. Of course it does. Yeah.
But previous reports to this committee have said that our performance on procurement hasn't always been what it should be.
Okay. Like to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to hopefully give more assurance, we're working, of course, with Welland Procurement to help us to ensure that we're compliant, and all the work that we do will be governed by our contractual procedural rules and also our financial regulations, which will mean that decisions need to be taken even by full council, Councillor Baxter. So right along the route to this, there will be points where members and others get the opportunity to scrutinise and also to provide themselves with assurance that the right processes have been followed. I recognise what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but for something, as you quite rightly say, so significant for the organisation, we will of course have all the right processes in place, and we'll be taking advice wherever we need to ensure that we are compliant and that we get this decision right for the people of the Deepings, but also obviously for the wider taxpayers of the district.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I've just got a couple of questions for you, Lucy. Nothing major. Thank you very much for your draft internal audit plan. I noticed nothing wrong with that. I'm quite pleased with it. I noticed we don't have any time scales at the moment. How will you deal with that? Will that come later on when you develop it? I mean, I'm guessing that obviously we've got a plan of how you intend to carry out the work, but we don't want to be leaving it all to the last 6 months of the year. So will you be developing a plan and some sort of time scale for carrying out that?
Yes, the simple answer is we'll be working with Tracy to pull together a schedule, and we'll be working with that, liaising with management to look at when the best time to undertake the work. When you get the progress report, that sets out when there's a number of KPIs that we monitor. It's very similar to they're pretty industry standard. So it looks at how long we take. We try. We have a KPI around the time from start to issue of the draft report. We also have KPIs around feedback, added value, and you'll be able to see the progress. And we look to give those progress reports generally quarterly, and we give an annual report at the end of the year. So again, it's looking to give you that insight. I think the key thing is what we're looking to do, and that's where we were going to explore with yourselves, is ensuring that you have the accountable managers present at these meetings to help answer any questions that are relevant to progress and areas of low assurance, and also to discuss ensuring that you're focusing on the areas that are most risk. And a lot of the information today was around on low assurance or low priorities, and it's making sure that your time spent on focusing on some of those key matters within the outcome of our work, but also picking up areas that you can get assurance from other sources than just ourselves as a governance and audit committee. So Richard and Tracy and Karen has asked us to do that workshop with you, just to explore some of the ways that you can look at the assurance framework and get that assurance, not just from ourselves, but from the wider assurance framework of the council.
If I could just follow that up as well. I mean, will you, as we talked to RSM, things left over, will you be making that a priority, the work that's left over from them? You'll be picking that up and liaising with them when...
We will be working with that for action to pick up all the outstanding recommendations. We will be also assessing the level of risk to the council's control framework of those, but we will be tracking them. So again, we track outstanding recommendations. So the first one, we will also be picking up any outstanding issues that are carried forward. So we'll be using that for action, working with Tracy to monitor those forward. So I will be having attended today's meeting, a discussion with Lisa, just to get some insight of how as an outgoing head of internal audit, what her views of the council is.
My final question, Lucy. If the vice chairman and myself want a point of contact, would it be with you initially, or if you've got any queries, or with Alistair?
It will be with Alistair. I think obviously it's a new relationship, so I will be helping to smooth things and coming to the next few meetings and doing the workshop. But hopefully Alistair will be able to answer any questions. But I do have an open door policy. I think if there's any concerns, and obviously we've spoken in already informally, so it's important to have those regular catch-ups. So I think you've asked for, as well as Alison working directly with Tracy, is for us to have a regular sort of catch up to see how things are going, which again is happy to do as and when we go through. But generally, we tend to do that every quarter.
That's fine. Thank you very much. That's fine. Right. Could I have a proposal to accept the draft internal audit plan for 22-23? Cathy Rice actually proposes it. Councillor Sue Woolley seconds it. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Right, we'll move on. Item 9, accounting policies. Alison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The council's accounting policies are reviewed annually prior to the preparation of the statement of accounts and then presented to this committee. I can confirm that there have been no significant changes to the SIPA code of practice. So the accounting policies used to produce the 2021 accounts remain unchanged. I think the main point for members to note is that the publication date for the 21-22 statement of accounts for draft accounts will be the 31st of July. But next year we expect the proposed publication date for the 22-23 statement of accounts to move to the 31st of May for each following year. So just to reassure members, we are working towards preparing a draft set of accounts by the 31st of May this year, because then this will enable us to put any actions in place should we not meet that date, to prepare us for the new deadline next year. The accounting policies are detailed in Appendix A for members to review. That's really all I've got to comment on the report. Thank you.
I haven't got any questions. Has any member of the committee got any questions? No? Right then, we've got a recommendation. We have a proposal for the recommendations. Oh, if nobody, are you proposing it, Councillor? Oh, very good. So, Councillor Gloria Johnson will second. All those in favour of accepting it, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Right, we move on now. Item 10, the work programme. As you'll see, we've got another meeting planned for the 20th of April. The idea of that was so we didn't put too much onto this agenda, and we have another meeting on the 20th of April. Any comments on the work programme from anybody? No? Yeah, Councillor.
Only a fairly basic one, and it refers back to something I said earlier, that we factored in flexibility to add or remove items from the agenda as and when necessary.
I'll just make one correction, as our Vice Chairman has pointed out, on the work programme today. Draft internal audit draft plan, it lists it as for 21-22. It's actually 22-23, which is Lincolnshire Assurance. That's just a correction for that. So we're all quite happy to accept the work programme. I propose we accept it. Have a seconder, please. Okay. All in favour? Okay, yeah, we're very unanimous, aren't we? Thank you. Thank you for attending.